Hello, and welcome to Leaders of Today, Teens to Titans. Today, I'm excited to introduce you to Chelsea Fournier, a business strategist and intuitive mentor who helps coaches, healers, authors, and speakers turn their inspiration into impactful, aligned businesses. But before Chelsea became a guide for creative entrepreneurs, she was a quiet, unintentional leader, one who didn't fully recognize her own strengths, even though others saw them clearly. As a teen, Chelsea was highly creative, spending hours in the dance studio, thriving on discipline and routine, and discovering a passion for teaching. Whether she was mentoring young dancers or running summer camps, she had a natural ability to break down complex ideas into simple, actionable steps, a skill that continues to define her work today in marketing, sales, and business strategy. Her journey took a major turn when she became a lawyer and business coach, but it was her spiritual awakening and motherhood that truly shaped her mission, helping thought leaders take up more space online and earn a living doing what they love without the hustle culture, bro marketing, or burnout. In this episode, we'll explore how Chelsea learned to trust her intuition, leverage her strengths, and embrace an aligned approach to success. If you've ever felt disconnected from your own potential or struggled to see what others see in you, Chelsea's story will inspire you to step into your power with confidence. Without further ado, let's jump right in. You're listening to Today's Leaders, from Teens to Titans. Hi, I'm Lorraine Connell, a teen leadership coach. I transitioned from teaching chemistry to coaching teens in leadership, helping them realize they can do hard things. We've often believed that leadership is an innate trait, but it's actually a skill that you build and improve. On this show, you'll meet today's leaders who share their teenage experiences, revealing how they developed confidence, direction, and the tools to become the leaders they are now. You'll discover how you or the teens in your life have the potential to become confident leaders, even if it doesn't seem possible. Welcome, Chelsea. It is so awesome to have you on the podcast.
I'm so excited to be here. I love the work you do and how you help teens and parents, so I'm so excited.
So I would love for you to take a moment to go back to your teen years, even if you want to go back to even before your teen years, just share some of the experiences that you had at that point in your life and how they may have shaped you into what you're doing today, who you are today, and the experiences that you have today.
Yeah. Well, I know obviously you were going to ask this question, and I'm like, what is it that's most helpful to share? And I think it's helpful to give a little context. So I'm the youngest of 3 children. So I have 2 siblings, an older brother and an older sister. And they're significantly older. My sister's 10 years older, my brother 4.5 years older. And so I was definitely the baby. And so as I started to grow up, we all take on our role, our pattern in a family dynamic, right? Sometimes it's healthy, sometimes it's not healthy. And the role that I have always played is being the easy one, the one that we don't have to worry about, the people pleaser who's an empath. And so I'm going to mitigate any potential for conflict because it makes me so anxious, right? And I'm sure a lot of people who listen to this, you might either have a teen who is more of an empath or an anxious kiddo, or maybe that was you. But if you had asked any of my peers or AP teachers or anybody in my sphere when I was a teen, I guarantee they would say she had it all together. She was never a problem. She was always the leader in the group. But inside, it was a very different experience. And I was very much masking. Now, as an adult, being very confidently self-diagnosed with autism and ADHD, I can look back and understand that term of masking, but there was so much that was just fight or flight right under the surface for me all the time. And so it definitely, being in the creative world, in the dance world, that was a huge part of my personality, part of my week, my peers, just everybody who I grew up with in the dance studio. And there's a lot of amazing things about being in the dance world. There's also a lot of things that are normalized around eating disorders and pushing yourself too far and just some unhealthy behaviors. And that became part of my personality too. As we look back, I can just be like, oh, little Chelsea, like, you're doing so much. It's okay. But there was just so much always under the surface. And I know we're going to kind of weave in a little bit of what is different for me now. But at the time, I was so disconnected from my body. I was so disconnected from any sense of like intuition or gut feeling, and just really trying to make people like me. I was probably someone who everybody would be like, oh, yeah, we know Chelsea. She's, I don't know, president of something or other. I was always like in leadership titles. I know you talk about like leadership doesn't always have to have a title. I did just naturally have those things kind of come my way, and enjoyed kind of the routine and the discipline, and being busy was really good for me. And it was just a lot to hold as 13, 14, 15, 16-year-old Chelsea. It also started to lead me to being in unhealthy romantic relationships, which carried on into my 20s and even into my first marriage. And a lot of that really stemmed from being so disconnected from what feels right for me, instead of what would the popular people, who would they want me to date? What party should I go to? And so I just floated through where everybody probably knew who I was, but I didn't feel super connected to big peer groups. I did have 2 or 3 like solid core dear friends going through high school, but it was always a little bit like I was on the outside of them, if that makes sense. Let me read the room and how I can show up in this situation so that people will think I have it all together.
That's amazing. I think it's so interesting for me to be able to listen to somebody tell their story of being a teenager. I hear so many themes in many of the people that I've talked to. I see those themes occurring in current kids. I saw you saying that everybody knew you. You were the president of this or that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the themes that I see in student leadership or teenage leadership is you're either doing everything or you don't have the confidence to do anything.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Really that middle zone. And the reason that I really wanted to talk to you today was about that knowing, about that understanding, about that listening to what feels good. And so I don't know if you can identify what it was as a teenager that made you think that your voice wasn't important. And I don't know, I don't mean to put that in your own 5 words into you, but I think that's really valid for lots of our teens, is to say, whatever I want isn't important. So the people thing, the masking. So is there anything that you can recall, or what woke you up to knowing that that is something that is important for us?
Yeah, I think you can only look back with more insight. Sitting here as a, 41, 42-year-old, and I can look back and really see how some childhood trauma and childhood abuse tied into me saying, I can't talk about important things, right? And, not to get too deep, but things that happen to you as a child, even maybe before you remember, the body remembers, and the body keeps the score, right? And so as these deep beliefs of my voice doesn't matter, I'm not supposed to tell on people, and then you start to get into teenage years, and for me, there was opportunities to be engaging in, let's be honest, risky behavior, like bad choices, like drinking in the field in the dark, and just putting myself in situations where I'm like, oh gosh, I hope my son, I'm sure he'll do that, but I hope he doesn't, because there was some really unsafe situations that I put myself in. And it was always ignoring the intuition because I wanted to be seen as cool, or I wanted to be included the next time these friends did something and not have them think, oh, she's lame. And so there was definitely some positive relationships, but I would often gravitate towards wanting approval from people who were a little bit edgier and like people I was dating, or friends who were 2 or 3 years older than me, or friends I met in the dance world who were in college when I was in high school, and just being like, well, I don't want to be the lame one, right? And now kind of understanding neurodivergence and that I was never diagnosed or looked at through that lens in my teen years at all. So much was lost on me as far as understanding social cues. And so I was constantly like, well, this doesn't feel right, but I must have missed something. I must have not understood something. And so I don't want to be the one to point out that this is a bad idea. And so I would just go with it, right? And so there's definitely parts of me that I can look back and see if I had listened to my intuition, certain unsafe situations or just not great situations could have been avoided if I had listened to my gut and trusted that even if I didn't fully understand something, I could listen to what felt good to my body. And so there was a lot of talking myself out of what I was feeling because I must be missing something or I don't want to be the only odd one out. And also those just core beliefs from childhood trauma of I'm not supposed to say when bad things are happening.
That brings up and I haven't really identified how to ask this question, but I really want you to help parents and teens listening to this understand, how does your body sort of let you know that things aren't right? We use the term listening to our guts. As I feel like more mainstream, it's becoming like intuitive or intuition. But I would love to give it a framework for a parent or a teenager to say, oh, this is what it feels like when things don't feel right to me, because I don't know that we trust what we feel in our body.
I think that's really true. And I'm also trained in human design, which is kind of like a subset of astrology. And I don't know that I buy into everything with human design, even though I'm a guide and I've been trained in it. But the one thing that always stood for me is that if you learn your human design type, it teaches you what your ideal authority is. So in human design world, your authority is your ideal decision-making style. And so there's different ones. There's emotional authority, sacral authority, which is like your gut. So different ways. I think there's 5. And what's so fascinating is I think sometimes we try to put everybody in one category of what it would feel like or what it would be like to make an intuitive decision. And what learning about human design helped me to open my mind to is maybe it's not so black and white. Maybe you being intuitive, whether it's because you understand your human design or just are self-aware, maybe you need to sleep on things. Maybe you need to listen to those inner knowing whispers. Whereas for me, I really identify with my authority as a sacral authority. And if I have gathered my information and I've had some conversations, I get a gut ping. And so for me as a sacral, it's a really great practice to use yes or no questions. Yes or no. Do I want to do this? Does this feel good? Do I want to do this or that? To narrow it down. And I use a lot of muscle testing, whether it's using a pendulum, like a crystal pendulum, or just kind of like actual testing with your muscles of what is right and what's in my highest and best. And there's different methods that you can kind of adopt. But what's been really fascinating to me is my son, who's 5 years old, is also a sacral. And so I've introduced him to some of these concepts. My husband is more of an emotional authority. So if I'm asking questions of them, hey, Emery, my son, to celebrate your birthday, do you want to have a party or go on a family trip? Whatever his first instinct is, he might talk himself out of it or get feedback from someone else. But what his first instinct is his intuitive hit, if you will. Whereas my husband, as an emotional authority, I would have to say, what would feel better to you for us to spend time together as a family on a trip, or what would feel best to celebrate you? And more open-ended questions. And so I think that sometimes we try to create like a specific framework, and whether it's exploring human design, I actually have a book on using human design to parent the child that you have. And it's really helpful. Like I have my son's chart up in the hallway just to walk by and remind myself, like, oh yeah, we're different. And he's much more likely to lean towards X or Y. That has been a really helpful, just like additional layer of self-awareness. I love anything that's self-awareness. But I do think that it can be hard as a teen to be like, well, what is my method of feeling like I'm really getting the intuitive or just the honesty. I think it is. It comes down to what is the honest way that I feel like I can walk this earth and make decisions that are best for me, and how hard that is. And even if as a teen you do have an inclination of what it looks like maybe you are someone who has a little bit of a fiery temper and knows that you need to sleep on it and feel into a decision and not make a split decision, setting those boundaries can be really challenging. When I was a lawyer, everything is risk assessment, pros and cons and lists. And so there were so many times when I would be in negotiations or advocating on behalf of a client, and regardless of what all the lists said, my gut would say, this is what needs to happen. This is the best path forward. But I would talk myself out of leading with that because I had to do it through a certain process, right? That matched my career, my profession, what would be respected. And so I think in every phase, finding that self-awareness, even journaling, even if it doesn't sit on your heart to explore astrology or human design, even just as a teen or as a parent of a teen, journaling on big decisions that come up. And what do you observe feeling best? What do you observe a style of decision making or a way of processing? If you're a splenic authority in human design, it's someone who you would say is an old soul, or someone who just gets these unexplained intuitive hits where you might say, hey, Lorraine and I are going to meet for coffee at this particular coffee shop. And you guys are about to walk in, and the splenic might be like, nope, we're not going in. Well, why? I don't know, but we're not going in. 3 days later, you'll find out there was food poisoning that day. So almost this there's no way you could have possibly known that, right? But as a teen, there are teens who have that I don't know, you just got to trust me, right? I can envision myself, even as a teen in some situations, being like, I don't know why, but you just need to trust me. And that can be a hard thing to say to adults or to people who, are waiting for you to make a decision.
Well, and actually what came up for me as you were describing that is to really listen to when you make a decision that doesn't align with you, right?
Yeah.
So that may be the place that a teen is going to learn the most is when make a decision. And you mentioned risky behaviors. And I think a lot of people dismiss choices we make as a rite of passage. But what if we have a conversation with a teen or teen who made a choice that ended badly and walked them back to the point in which they could say, it was here that I didn't think I should do that. And so what would you encourage me as a parent to then, we can identify the moment that my teen is saying, this is where I knew I was making a choice that didn't fit.
Yeah. Well, I can speak from my experience of what would have made me as a teen feel safe to explore that is knowing that it was a safe space without emotional charge. We're just going to walk back through here. We've all identified and agreed this was a bad decision. You got kicked out of school or whatever happened. And so let's just walk backwards. Safe space. Nobody's judging you. What were some of the decision trees that happened for you, and what influences did you take in to make certain decisions? And at what point did you feel like, oh gosh, maybe I shouldn't be doing this? And for me, there was also just a pattern of I could get away with things. I used to skip school all the time. I had a forged hall pass, and in this situation, I was actually just being kind of an oddball that I would go to the gym instead of go to classes that I had already aced because I was a dancer and was trying to strengthen. So I would drive to the YMCA and sneak out this particular. And so I got away with a lot. If somebody saw me walking through the halls, they just assumed Chelsea was on some extra credit assignment for AP Bio or whatever. And so I could get away with a lot. And that was then this almost infallibility. Well, I'm not going to get in trouble. Nothing's going to happen. And so I had lived experience and evidence that I could get away with not following the rules, and it was fine. And so then when I would break some rules and it was not fine, it was confusing to me. If that makes sense. My brain is still forming and I can't figure out the patterns of when I can break rules and it's okay and when I can break rules and it's not okay. So I would have benefited with safe debriefs, if that makes sense, of you're going to have other decisions like this. Let's wind it back and just talk through some of those options and what did it feel like in your body? What did it feel like in your heart? What did it feel like in your throat? Were you nervous to say something? I think the more we can bring everything back to everything is energy, our bodies are vibrating little cells of energy, right? And there's often times that we're just moving so fast. I can't imagine being a teen in this day and age where everything is documented and social media. Like, I get so overstimulated as an adult interacting with how much access we have to information, and self-regulating that to slow things down, I think would be really beneficial so that there can be processing without just so much coming at a teen.
Yeah. And for me, I've certainly recognized that the age of 16 is a really pivotal moment for teens. They get their license. It's, usually their junior year. And now they really need to know what their path is. And the input of information is coming in and them from a lot of different places. And if I haven't learned how to listen to my own voice, listen to my body, feel my body in decisions, then
Yeah.
it goes away and I stop.
Yeah.
It's like a muscle, right? So we're
Yeah.
not building that muscle, and the muscle just doesn't exist until we bring it back in at some point.
Yeah. But I think that's really true. And as you were just describing that like junior year, I was picturing that I was the only child at home by then because my siblings were older. And so I had taken over my brother's room with college applications. And so like each school I was applying to had a pile and the forms and everything that had to happen. And I just remember it feeling so overwhelming and being like, I'm just looking at this pretty pamphlet. And I think I might want to minor in photography because I liked taking black and white photography for physical therapy. So I was trying to do condensed track doctoral programs. And I'm just like, this was so much information. I ended up choosing to go to a school in Pennsylvania. So I'm from Maine. So I was in Maine, chose to go to a school in Pennsylvania that's now called Arcadia University because at the time it had the only fast track doctoral program. And so once I showed up, it was like an intense program. It was so many science classes at a time and high track math really quickly. And I started to deeply regret being that far from my family and being like, I know I can do this. I know I'm smart, but do I have to fast track this? And I remember how gut-wrenching it was to call my parents and say, I think I want to transfer to somewhere closer. And like just feeling like I was letting them down. I was letting my friends at school that I had made down because there was so few PT programs at the time. I was giving up on my whole dream that I had done internships around. But I would shake just being so stressed. I was also, while I was there, it was 9/11. From my psychology class, we watched planes go into the towers. And so it was a very scary time to be away from my family as I wasn't even 18 yet because I was so young coming out of high school. And so I think for me, I can picture so many little micro decisions. I think that's what maybe the takeaway for me is that there's so many micro decisions that add up to bigger decisions. And this is exactly how I do strategy and coaching and marketing is let's just look at one. Little micro decisions add up really quickly to a bigger decision and a bigger commitment. And there's so many micro decisions where I didn't quite understand things. Like I didn't understand what it would feel like to be that far from family. I didn't understand how intense it would be to be in that type of program. I couldn't understand, what dorm life would be like for someone who was autistic and gets overstimulated, living with 3 women in a room. Like until you're doing it, you can't understand it. And so I think there was a lot of times when, everybody wants me to be making a decision and making it confidently. So I'm just going to march forward. And that was a really hard pivot point for me to call my parents. I remember I was shaking at a little tiny green cell phone and being like, I know you just like upended everything to drive me out here and I can't stay here another year. And what does it look like for us to help me transfer? And that was a huge change for me and a huge advocacy point for me to like finally listen and be like, yes, I can do it, but it is too much. It's frying my nervous system. It is like spreading me way too thin and I'm not thriving here.
I think You bring up this really common thing that I think we experience as individuals so often. There comes a time when there's a decision that you've made that you have to say was the wrong decision. And again, if you haven't flexed that muscle,
Yeah, it's
it
hard.
can be devastating. It can be just debilitating. I mean, you said you were shaking. I mean, you definitely mustered the courage to get there, but I can imagine not having the courage to say that and muddling through. And the consequence of not having that courage is what I think a lot of families are facing right now, because their teens are away from home for the first time, doing life on their own for the first time, and they don't know how to ask for help. They don't know how to listen to themselves and saying that this is definitely not healthy for me.
Yeah.
And saying, I will just power through, right? You said there have been times where you just took the next step, but it only gets you further away from what is right for you, and the results can be really scary.
Yeah. Well, and I think for me anyway, when I would feel those intensities, if I wasn't willing to set up a boundary or that conversation about change, is when I would just start to numb. So I would binge drink, I would binge eat, I would put myself into unsafe situations and just be like, okay, I'm ignoring the big thing that needs to be decided by numbing. And that was then kind of like a next big chunk of college until law school, and so many micro decisions that I wish I had been more tuned into, and instead just like plowing through, like you just said.
Yeah. And I mean, I think of my own journey, and I numbed too. And we all have different ways of processing decisions that we know are not right for us. And when we're faced with what to do in the, now I've got another decision about what to do about this decision I have to make. Now I'm like decision fatigue. Which is something that you talk a lot about when you work with small businesses. And like, how do I make these decisions? Well, let's just focus on one.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's some really solid advice to give to our teens, is when you're feeling that decision fatigue, take one thing.
Yeah.
And help and listen. You have to build that confidence in knowing that it's okay to listen to what you want, even if it doesn't match what the people that you perceive to be the most important people in your life, right? My mom wants me to go to this college and I really don't want to go, but I'm going to go to make her happy.
Yeah. Right. Like, I think when you're younger, there's less consequences, right, of some of the decisions that you make. And then as you get closer to like young adulthood, the consequences are big financially. Like that 1 year in that doctoral program was the most expensive year. It was even more expensive than going to law school. And I didn't understand the implications of taking out student loans. My family was not in a position to pay for that for me. And so that took me the longest to pay off, right? And the stakes just become bigger as you have exposure to more risk, whatever that means: financial risk, professional risk, reputation risk, physical risk, emotional risk. And as that gets bigger and bigger, if you haven't found a way to really tap into that inner knowing and advocating for it, that's when I think we get really off track. And then even into adult years, like I remember, since we're kind of being honest here, I remember when my first husband proposed to me, my gut was screaming, no. I had no idea it was coming. It was a surprise. Hell no. And in the moment, it was romantic and he had planned this and it was a yes. And like literally within 2 days, I was like, how do I unwind this? Just kidding. Oh, now there's an engagement party being planned. Oh, now we're looking at wedding venues. And so you just like, oh, okay, this will be fine. It was just a bad initial reaction, but the stakes are bigger as you get older and as you have more kind of at play. And I wish that I could go back and just help myself make decisions that were based on how I felt, and trust that how my body felt was a stronger guide and worth fighting for, basically, to say, no, I am feeling this. I need to slow down, feel this, ask for some time if I need to. I think we move so fast paced in life and business and everything these days that you're just saying, I need 5 minutes to just process what's happening and decide how I want to respond can be a very scary statement to make, to be like, what's wrong with me if I need time to process and feel? Well, there's nothing wrong with you. It's just that most people don't do that.
Right. And they don't do it because they don't know that they cannot do that. So often, when we don't take that moment to pause and reflect and explore, that's scary too, right?
Yeah.
And so pausing can be very overwhelming and scary. Just even asking for time and to not have an answer can feel very unsettling. So interesting for me to be having this conversation with you, because now I'm thinking of my own journey and spaces where now I'm reflecting back. Was that the right decision? I know now it wasn't the right decision.
Right.
Where could I have shifted? When you said saying yes to that proposal, I think that could have easily been anybody, right? This feels amazing. And isn't the right answer yes? Who says
Right.
no?
Who says no? Exactly. Yeah. And then it's that like self-imposed pressure, especially for young women who might have that like people-pleasing tendency. I want to be well-liked. I want to be, high esteem from others. It can be really hard to shed that if you've already got that ingrained. And, I'm just picturing like my son is incredibly self-aware, and he'll tell me, we need to both take a minute and go think about what we're saying. I'm like, totally true. He came up to me the other day and said, I don't think that you're using your best words right now. And I was like, I was being snarky. Totally. Like, like
That so much.
right? And we really foster that. And he has his own crystal pendulum. He wanted amethyst, and I teach him how to use body swaying. When you hear people talking about like teaching intuitive eating, like holding food to your body and seeing like, does your body sway forward? That's often a yes for people. Do you kind of stumble left or right? That's usually a no. That can be a really compelling way to look at how you're making decisions based on how you feel. I think finding a method, and it can be a little bit of a rabbit hole of like, now there's this whole world of spirituality or energy or what feels right for me based on my beliefs and based on whatever's else is coming up. But I want him to feel like he can ask for space, that he can decide that he needs to go grab his crystals or that he needs to go for a walk before he decides something. As a parent, I know he's not a teen yet, but it is hard for me sometimes to be called out on that and be like, yeah, you do deserve to have some space before you decide if you want to go play with this friend or go to the library. Take a second. We don't have to rush everything. And as you get older and he's a teen, things just move faster. And so how can I, as a parent, if I'm saying you deserve time to make a decision, can I hold myself to that and not be rushing us because we need to figure out what we're doing or we need to make plans? And something that I'm really working on in the parent role is like, he deserves time to process, even if I don't understand why he needs time right now. It doesn't have to logically make sense to me that he's not ready to reply or make a decision. It just is his process right now. And if he's being communicative and respectful, like if he's saying, I don't know the answer to that. Okay, I need to honor that. I can't push you right now. And I think that's something that I wish I had more guidance on. And so now I'm kind of like, inner child work and parenting my son and, just like looking at, there's no perfect world. I'm going to screw my son up somehow. I am positive. But some of these things I'm really trying to ingrain that I hope really stick with him.
Well, in all honesty, we don't get to where we are in life without the things that happen to us. So, like, while every parent has those moments of, wow, that was the worst thing I could ever have done to my child, they are resilient. We are resilient. And got to the place we are where we are now because of those experiences. And while I don't wish negative experiences on anybody, they do help us grow.
Well, and your whole tagline is we can do hard things, right? Like teens can do hard things, parents can do hard things. Like, especially in the world that we live in today, there's so many things that I grew up in. Third grade, we finally got a computer to do the Oregon Trail. So I am that generation that was before technology, and now I run a marketing agency where like everything's technology. And so I'm that like bridge generation, if you will. And it's hard for me to perceive exactly what a teen is going through right now. I don't have that same energetic lived experience,
Right. Yeah. I often find myself leaning into saying to both of my teenagers, I don't have anything to rely on to help me make this
Mm,
decision.
yeah.
I'm going to make the decision and we'll reevaluate
Yeah.
because there's never the perfect way to go through life.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
Ray has figured that out because perfection doesn't exist. And I think I keep finding perfection in lots of avenues of my life. Oh, I was trying to be perfect here. Oh, I was trying to be here. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, how many
Yeah.
places perfection preventing me from listening to myself.
Wow. Wow. That's really powerful.
Yeah. So, Chelsea, you have gone through this journey where you are truly in touch now with your intuition. What advice would you go back and share with Chelsea, who was a teenager, but for our current teens today?
Yeah. I think it would be just to be willing to explore myself. I was so keen to explore everything out of the world, everything outside of me, explore what I wanted to learn, explore what I wanted to do as a profession, explore relationships, but taking time to just explore me, what I liked, how I made decisions, what felt good to me. I think that could have really prevented a lot of heartache and challenges that I went through if just spending time by myself, going out on a date by myself to the beach to read a book I liked and decreasing some of the stimulation and just allowing myself to explore who I was earlier, I think would have made a big difference.
I think it's important for us to learn who we are so that we can then evaluate how others impact us as
Mm-hmm.
well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How can people find you?
So I am pretty active on social media. My primary website is intuitivebusinessbydesign.com. I am Intuitive Business Mentor or Chelsea Fournier on all the social media streets. Active on Instagram, and also our agency is Intuitive Marketing Collective if anybody wants to explore.
That's awesome. Thanks, Chelsea, for sharing your insights and your advice and really helping me really evaluate how I listen to myself.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
You betcha. Are you ready to help the young people in your life unlock their inner strength and step confidently into leadership? The new workbook from Peers Not Fears, Your Voice Matters, Uncovering Your Unique Leadership. It's designed to help teens see the leader in themselves, step by step. It's not just a workbook. It's the first step towards a ripple effect that could change lives. Let's turn today's teens into tomorrow's titans. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Leaders of Today, Teens to Titans. If you found this episode helpful, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with other parents who might benefit from this conversation. Together, we can support our teens in building healthy, positive relationships and become leaders of tomorrow. Until next time, I'm Lorraine Connell, and this is Leaders of Today, Teens to Titans.